So, first of all, thank you everybody that has taken time out of your busy schedules to join us for the first and what we plan to be an ongoing client interview series here at Delta Media Group. The topic for today is leveraging AI and open APIs for growth. And I've got joining me today two great partners with Delta Media Group, two broker owners that are going to share a little bit about how they've
Can't
been
hear
able to take
anything that they're
advantage of
saying.
various different tools and
Close
things
down
that we
chat.
offer. So, with that being said, I'd like to introduce today our two panelists. So I've got with me John Adams and John D'Souza. John Adams is the president at Adams Cameron and Company Realtors, and John D'Souza is the president and co-owner at Cressy and Everett Real Estate. And just to kind of set the stage for what we're going to be getting into today, I had a wonderful conversation with John Adams a couple of weeks ago where he had shared an instance where there's a tool that he was working on, and he happened to be in the room with John D'Souza. And we'll get a little bit more into this later in the interview. But John was kind of curious what he was working on, and it spurred a conversation between me and John Adams about just the thought leadership opportunity we have to share how really technology-oriented company owners are taking advantage of the tools that we offer at Delta to really move the needle and make a difference in their business. So if you don't mind, I'm going to start with John Adams. Do you mind taking a moment just to kind of introduce yourself and share with the webinar group a little bit about your company and your business?
Yeah, so I'm John Adams. I'm with Adams Cameron and Company Realtors. We're in Florida. We're on the east coast of Central Florida. So most people know Daytona Beach. We're north and south and inclusive of Daytona, and over to our western area is bedroom community for Orlando. We've got just under 300 agents, and we've been in business since 1963.
Awesome, thank you. And John D'Souza, do you mind sharing a little bit about your organization?
Sure. Chris and Everett, we cover North Central Indiana and Southwest Michigan, 175 agents currently, and we're celebrating our 80th year this year.
Awesome, congratulations. And I should just note as well that both of your organizations are both affiliated with the leading real estate brokerages of the world. So they are both leading RE members. All right, and thank you for that intro. So I'd like to open just a little bit about, for those that are less technical in the audience, tell us a little bit about how technology fits into your day-to-day operations and any unique thing, little tidbit or something you can share that you think is a unique tech tool that's in your tech stack that you guys use that you don't think many of your competitors may be doing in their day-to-day. And I'll start with you, John D'Souza.
Sure. A number of tools, number of resources. I think something that's a little different about us is that about 18 months ago, we launched our first internal AI tool. And it was a very simple customization of ChatGPT at the time. And we've been growing it ever since and learning a lot about the usage and about our agents and how they engage with AI. That way we're getting ready to move on to something else. But it's been a wonderful year and a half of learning and providing tools to our agents.
Awesome. John Adams, do you have anything you could share on that?
Yeah, we've got a wide variety of tools. Adoption rate, I think, is something that every brokerage struggles with. But we've been with DeltaNet for a long time now and have had great success with that. And then we use a wide variety of other tools. But our agents are they're tech averse, so we're very cautious about what we roll out, and everything that we do has to be focused on making sure that it's as simple as possible for the agents to use. Beyond that, we're on a Google platform, and we utilize as much as we can from what the state association works with. So,
Awesome. And has there been any moment where you guys realized that our tech isn't talking to each other the way that it should? Or John, what spurred you to start looking for ways to get extra data? Like, what was the problem you were trying to solve when you started exploring the APIs that Delta offers? And what was kind of the need that drove that?
was that John, me,
Sure.
or John Susan?
Either of you jump in.
Sure, I'll take a shot at that. We've actually have been using the API for a long time, back in version 1 and in the earlier days. And our use was not the AI type of use that we may be discussing today, but it's really just working with other vendors. We knew that as we were working with other pieces of specific technology, we didn't want to reinvent the data whenever possible, right? So we knew the data first starts in the MLS for the most part, and then flows to our preferred vendors, and in this case, Delta Media. And I knew that instead of trying to create other sources and other links, especially a lot of different MLS links, we knew that we could source it from one source. We could source it from Delta Media. So for a long time, for example, we've been providing the data to a company that produces a weekly TV show for us. Yeah, we still have one of those, 20-something years going. But this vendor receives a constant feed about our new listings and agents and all that kind of information that way. And that helps them produce the show in the most efficient way, which is the lowest cost for us. So that's one way in which we've been using the API for quite a few years.
Awesome. And John Adams, how about you?
So I actually started using APIs from our MLSs to try and pull together. We have multiple different MLSs, and we were pulling data from them really initially to compare because we were looking at the fact that when you have several different MLSs, there are agents who might have a listing in one of the MLSs and then they get a price reduction, for example, and they don't think to adjust the price in each MLS. And the challenge then, of course, is that the seller calls and they say, we agreed finally to reduce the price by $20,000, and we looked on Zillow and it's not right. And so we were building a tool to pull information from various MLSs. And once we started doing that, we started looking at other things that we could do. And I was on conversation with my DeltaNet representative, Zach, who said, we started talking about it, and I realized that you guys already have all our data, and you're pulling from all the MLSs. And he let me know that you guys have an API. And so we started building other products around that because you already have access to all this stuff and you're normalizing it. So it's a whole lot easier for us to expand on it once it's all in one place. And your API is a lot cleaner, quite frankly, than we used Spark for Flex MLS, and we used Bridge or Cotality to try and connect to our matrix systems. And it's just a whole lot easier to use the DeltaNet system. So that's kind of how we got started on this.
Awesome. Thank you. And I will note for anybody that's on this call that's curious about what data we have available, you can send to support@deltagroup.com an API request form, and they'll give you the documentation and information about what's available to pull from our API framework. That's not anything that's gate kept or anything like that. So you can just request it and our team will give you the documentation. That being said, this was a question I originally had teed up for you, John Adams, but John DeSouza, if you've got anything to add too. It's clear that you guys are using this in your day to day, and the APIs are very important for communicating with various vendors. So the question is for anybody in the audience that would be evaluating technology vendors of any type, be it CRM, website, marketing, what kind of questions do you think a broker should ask as it relates to APIs? If they're interviewing any type of tech vendor, what kind of framework would you use for questions to ask?
I would start by answering that to say that it's never a question I've ever asked any tech vendor until recently when I started realizing just how valuable these things were. We talked about usability, we talked about agent adoption, which are obviously very, very important. But now that we've gotten exposure to it, which has only happened in the last couple of months, it's been a real game changer for us. And I think that as AI progresses in general, and as it gets easier and easier to develop applications, through Claude and other AI systems, it's really changing what we need to be focused on in all aspects of technology. And one of the things that's so interesting to me is that when you have the ability to connect in using an API, these systems can dive in so quickly, and we can just feed it the information, and with really limited ability for programming, or we could go out and hire somebody who could turn things around very quickly to help expand on things that are specific to us. They're not things that I can go back. If I went back to DeltaNet and said, I want you to build something that's going to help us with, keeping track of our lockbox inventory, you'd look at me and go, that's not our core business, right? And yet you have some of the key data that we need in order to figure out if we've got a lockbox that's sitting on a listing that's no longer active. And when that information is so easy to pull together into what used to be a spreadsheet, it changes the discussion dramatically. So I think the question needs to be asked is, what is your API? What does it look like? What access am I going to have? I think that that's going to be a key question I have for everybody that we work with going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And one thing I would add to before John, I'll let you finish, is I think it's important to ask any vendor is there costs, is there limits on the number of API calls, and understanding that as well. With how frequently, I think John, you said you're pulling from our APIs very frequently. So just understanding with what you're building, how often you're going to need to be calling it, and if there's cost involved too, I think is important. And then John, I'll give you the last word on this before we move on.
Sure. Like John also, I don't think I ever really made that a formal part of our conversation and of getting to know the vendors. But in retrospect, I think the industry has moved or is moving from a mindset of sort of single product specialization, right? When you have a vendor that really does one thing, but along with that often comes a mindset of control and controlling the information. So why would they provide that information for you, right? Because that's not their business. Well, I think we are in a different place in a different time, and open access to the information ought to be the norm. And providing an API is how that happens.
Awesome. And so we're going to pivot now to some real world use cases on things that you guys have actually built leveraging APIs and leveraging AI infrastructure. And so, John, I know, as I mentioned at the beginning, this kind of all kicked off with you sharing a tool that you had built recently. And you don't need to show it if you're not comfortable showing it, but if you could just kind of describe one of the valuable workflows or tools that you've built leveraging our APIs and how you're applying it and your agents are applying it in their day to day.
I'm happy. Can I share straight from here?
Absolutely.
Well, I'll try, and if it works, great. It says it's not
There
turned
you
on.
go.
That's okay.
No, I
The
just gave you the ability to share.
Okay. Um, so you know, these are all things that we've built as a result of having the conversation, and so there are a wide variety of uses. But a simple one that's really easy to explain is this one, which we called Cameron's Lens, which is kind of Adam's Cameron and camera lens mixed together. But we had a back end product that would allow people to upload photos, and it would send it to AI to do AI enhancements of the property. And what we did is we just created a new one, and it was actually faster to create it than the amount of time it took for them to turn it around. So I just put in an MLS ID. It went to DeltaNet, got the pictures. I can click on one. There's the picture of it. There's the exterior. I can say, give it a golden hour. All this was built by AI. Enhance the landscaping. I can even say, put a yellow lab on the lawn. It's kind of my go-to. I hit enhance photo, and it runs off, and it will enhance that photo and give me a screen that shows, there's the golden hour, there's my yellow lab, if you can see all that. And
Yep.
so it's all right there. And then when we did that, we said, well, what about property descriptions? And the same thing. We pulled property descriptions, and that one doesn't have one, but because it's off market, that's why. But I can put in a MLS ID, and if I can find one that's active, and it will go out and it'll pull the property description along with the property type, all that sort of thing. And then I can come in here and I can say, do I want it professional and polished, warm and inviting, luxury and aspirational, whatever. Also, because we're in a market that speaks Spanish in some of our areas, we can also say translate it in Spanish. I hit generate description, and it'll rewrite the description that the agent's got out there. And it'll, in just a second, it'll show me a great description telling me, about that property. And then in a few more seconds, it'll translate it to Spanish for me so that I can upload it that way as well. This is one of the first tools that we built, but from an agent adoption standpoint, it's one of the highest adoption because it's just so straightforward. And, they could upload a photo to Gemini or to Chat GPT or whatever and say, take this picture and enhance the landscape and put it at sunset or other things like that. But we found that they weren't doing it. It just felt too scary. And yet, when you put it in this environment and you just make it as simple as tick a box and enter your MLS ID and tick a box, it's It's more widely used. So that's one of the products that we did. We've done a bunch that are very similar or related, but it's real powerful. And what's nice is I could easily send it directly over to DeltaNet. In this case, it actually copies it to the clipboard so they can put it back in the MLS, but only because there are so many things that the MLS feeds, Zillow and Realtor.com and Homes.com, that that's the best way for us to make sure that it's getting shown to everybody. So that's
Awesome.
an idea.
So
No,
you'd say, oh, go ahead, John.
no, Franklin, if I could just kind of point out, I mean, this is something that John Adams created. I find it just really pretty amazing. And the fact that, as John was saying earlier, that we, meaning people like us with some technical knowledge, but not necessarily, people who code for a living, right, can think things through, and we understand the business needs, we understand the business processes, and with a couple of pieces, obviously with access to the data, but also with the latest in AI tools, Cloud Cowork and Cloud Code are the most self-incited examples that something like that can come together. And John, you've described it to me as kind of the amount of effort and you put into it is not nothing, but it's also not sort of the most comprehensive, complicated project either. And the fact that that's available, I think that that's part of the message that we want to get across, that these things are within your grasp, they're within your reach.
And I think, John, you hit something else that's really important, which is we have a certain amount of business knowledge and understanding of what the agents need that maybe some developer who, might be overseas or whatever else doesn't really understand. And you're trying to explain it, and it takes so long and so many iterations to get that done. Whereas whether it's me doing it or if I'm sitting with somebody who can do it and they're showing it to me and I can go, that's great, but we really need the ability to, do this, enhance the landscaping. So like the thing I added in where I said, put a dog on the lawn, that wasn't there. And I said, what if an agent wants to do something else, right? So we had basics like remove the sign if there's a sign in the yard because our MLS doesn't allow that, enhance the landscaping and other things like that. And so we were able to build iteratively very quickly to put those types of things together.
Awesome, awesome. And before we move on from some of the real world use cases, John D'Souza, I had a question for you on, is there any specific integration, automation, data you're pulling for a report that your agents have come to rely on or use on a day-to-day basis? Anything you can share on that front?
Sure. So something that we're getting ready to roll out is something very simple, is a pictorial directory. In our agents, the fact that we work across a number of offices and they don't always know each other. So it'd be great to have a little pictorial directory that they can sort by name or by office or by something like that so that they can kind of recognize themselves. Now, this isn't all that complicated, right? We could have manually have put this together and, using any kind of graphic layout program, but then you have to keep it updated because agents come and go, right? So just the whole cadence of doing that mechanically is just felt so slow and awkward that we just didn't do it. And all of a sudden we can create something that's live, that's digital, that gets generated on the fly with this, and it's available right there. So it's simple. That's not a real game changer, but it's one of those little things that kind of falls in between the gaps, right? It's probably too small for it to be like a big project, and it may not be something that a vendor like Delta wants to build in because it's kind of a different need, and I probably wasn't going to take the time to go find a programmer to build this thing for me, right? So it's kind of in the middle ground, and it can very easily be put together with these tools, and there it is.
Awesome. Thank you. And so let's talk a little bit more on the AI side of things. So we touched on this a little bit already, but for either one of you, is there anything that you could say is direct practical value inside of the brokerage that you're leveraging AI for beyond something like listing descriptions, as you just showed, John Adams? Is there any other specific AI product or tool that's got practical, applicable value that your agents are using day to day?
Yeah, so far we did that one, and then we also looked at it and we looked at the bios, and you guys have Hera built in, and it can help with writing bios, but we wanted to put something together that customized a lot of our internal stuff. So think information about Adams Cameron, along with more background, because we also found that while agents were going out to do like their bios, for example, They didn't include everything that they could have included. And a lot of the agents have been around for a while. It says, this year I sold X number of dollars in real estate, and next year in 2015 I hope to do Y. And so the bios just weren't up to date. And so we built a tool like that for that. We built another one that goes out and pulls information about all the listings in a particular area and puts together charts and graphs showing, this is straight out of Ninja, but looking at, the numbers, the square feet and the price, and it plots all the properties that sold in the area, and sort of gives them an idea very quickly as to what the price per square foot should be. It also does a report that says, how things are selling, how many days on market at different price points. And so it does a little market analysis report. I mentioned earlier, we built one around lock boxes, but I think the biggest one that I've undertaken so far has been a system that we call Pathfinder. So I think most brokerages spend a lot of time on recruiting and retention, and I know we do, and we get people who ultimately they retire because they don't want to pay their dues again, or they're not doing enough business, or something else is in the way. And I think that a lot of those are excuses. And while we have managers who act as mentors to help them, we built a system that asks them about their goals, what they want to accomplish, and then it builds an entire business plan for them using AI. And then from that, it picks out particular items like, whether it's they're going to hold open houses, they're going to send mailers to their farm area, whatever else it happens to be. And then it sends them a reminder. And so once a week, they are prompted to say, how'd you do? What are you doing against your goals? And we recognize that sometimes somebody says, I'm going to be out of town for a week for a wedding or whatever else it happens to be. But it also tracks over a period of time and gives them a little bit of feedback and score, and coupled that with their manager. So I'm not trying to replace the one-on-one. I'm trying to just enhance that by making sure that we're getting more frequent follow-up. And it also uses AI to look at the production data, along with what they've been doing and versus what they said they were going to do. And then when the manager logs in, it says, this is what's happening with Franklin, and here are some talking points that you need to discuss. Franklin said, one of the questions we ask is, what did you spend extra time on? And they say, well, I'm having a hard time with the contract paperwork. Well, maybe Franklin, we should get you into our contracts class again, or maybe we need to sit down on a one-on-one and go over what it is specifically that you're having difficulty with. So we've gotten more ambitious, I guess, as we've started to explore it. But when you get into the API and you really look at all the paths that are available to you, there's just so much that we can do that's specific to us, but at the same time, it's common data that you guys have for every one of your customers.
Yeah, and there's actually something I wanted to add on that too, John. I'll put you on the spot a little bit because one of the tools you showed me that you'd also built is really applicable to several of the companies that I see on the call with us today that are larger in multiple MLS boards. Would you mind showing the tool that you built that shows the MLS IDs where you've got a listing in two MLSs and it can flag if there's improper information where an agent maybe updated a listing in one place but didn't update it somewhere else? And it's just a really
Yeah,
easy applicable tool that I think many
so
of our clients could appreciate.
this one I built for two of our primary MLSs, so Daytona and Stellar. And what it does is it goes out and it pulls from both of them, and then it looks at, and so it says I've got, X number of listings that are in both systems. You can see here that this one's in the MLS ID here versus there. And it shows you where they are. Now, I can't get Flex or Cotality to give me the ability to put data in, although I know they have that capability. They don't want to expose that to us. But what we did is we identified. So here's one, for example, that 509 Aidenmore Terrace is in Stellar, but it's missing from Daytona, and it's giving me the check marks, and I can see the agent name. But if I hit View Form, it'll show me the Daytona MLS input sheet in the order that Daytona asks for it. So that MLS looks for it. And then from there, it's easier to enter it because I just have the input sheet in the correct order for that MLS, so that if you've ever watched or worked with admins who are trying to enter it in multiple systems, they're struggling because the fields are in different places, maybe they're named different things, and it can't do everything because not all the information is exposed, but it just shows you where, all these things, and they can copy and paste to get it into that other system. Ideally, if we could get write access, if we get the ability to add the listing, I'd love to see it to the point where you enter a listing into one MLS and it's not in the other, and it comes back and it says, here's, do you want to add it to the other system? And I've tried so many ways to make that happen, and I haven't been able to. But the other thing that it does, if you look at this, it shows me there's two mismatches out here, and we don't have as many the first time I ran this, I think I had 16. And now I'm down to two. And if I really dive in, I mean, this one is 689 in one and 669 in the other. So they've reduced the price in one MLS, but not in the other MLS. So we've gone as far as actually sending emails to the agents and to the admin staff to say, hey, you got to be aware of it. There's always going to be things like this where it's, this is a commercial rental. And in one, it says 12,000, one, it says 1,000. So it's a monthly versus annual rental probably. But so it's not perfect, but it's identifying those issues that we see across MLSs and trying to help us in day to day to make sure that we're getting proper exposure for everything that's out there, and that the two systems are in line with one another, so that you don't have that call from the seller saying, hey, John, we after 4 months we finally agreed to reduce the price, and now it's still showing as the old price in Zillow. Because we don't have any control over which MLS they're pulling from.
Got it. Awesome.
And John, you used the term earlier. I used the term normalize, and I know what that means because you and I have a bit of a tech background, and that is a technical term in the world. But what you just showed is the opposite side of it, right? Is the reality that our MLSs have different data structure, and they have different choices, and they do it differently, right? And the folks at Delta do a great job normalizing the data. That means that they bring all this disconnected data into one standard, right? Which is great. So our websites, can show the data to consumers regardless of what the source was, the source MLS. Well, the fact that it's been normalized then allows us to do other things with it, and allows us to do all the marketing and things like that without those kinds of concerns. So in your example was the opposite, was taking that data and then going back to the sources and saying what doesn't fit. So it works both ways.
Yeah. Absolutely. Good point. And actually, John D'Souza, this harken back to a conversation that you and I had. This was maybe 6 months to a year ago. The question is essentially, what AI experiments have you done? We've been talking about the ones that have worked, but are there any AI experiments you've done that didn't necessarily work? I know there's tools that you've built that you're excited about, and you're like, why don't the agents use this? Is there any examples like that you could share with the group today?
Sure. There is, so like John, we also created a profile creator, an online bio creator. We took a little bit different approach in that ours has a very deliberate set of instructions that holds an interview. So it is basically as though you're sitting across from an interviewer and it's asking you a series of questions. And as you answer those, it takes all that into account and brings it together at the end. We found that agents were just having a hard time saying, finding what to say about themselves, right? Besides the obvious. So this is a set of questions. In the context for it, by the way, we went out into the internet and we found probably about 8 or 10 of the best articles that we could find online, publicly available articles about how to write a good bio, how to write a good profile. And all those then became the instructions for this tool. So it's in the background. People don't have to read the articles, right? It was just a knowledge source for this. So it's based on those kinds of things. So little bits like that. Also, we're rolling out a similar tool that is actually something to test and track online presence, right? To go online and say, okay, let's look through a number of different websites, a number of different resources, and see how you do. And we actually have something that will actually begin to score it. If I could share my screen here for a second. This is when somebody runs an audit, right? For example, run an audit for me. And this is all the behind the scenes stuff, but here it gives me a set of scores, right? Now, this is me, not the agent, this is me, the president. So never mind my low scores, but it gives you all that stuff. And then it can go into the details for each one of them, saying, okay, in social media, you score 45 out of 100. Why? And it goes through all the ones. We found you here, we didn't find you there, things like that. Likewise, for example, with review platforms, are you getting reviewed? Where are you showing up? So it's giving you those scores. And you can run this every so often, and you can see how hopefully your score, moves in the right direction. So this is one of those things. It's taken a while to kind of get the prompts correct and everything else, but it is the task. It's not super complicated, but it would have been so tedious, right, to go through all the platforms for every one of our agents and produce that when we can do this in literally in 60 seconds and have the results be right there.
Awesome. Thank you. And is there any tools, John, that you could share? This is talking a little bit about change management. And obviously, you guys both on this call are very technical and you can think logically and you're not afraid of trying new workflows. But is there any tools that you struggled to get buy-in internally rolling out and then figured out a way to get the agents to embrace the change? Or what's your approach to making sure agents are embracing the new changes and workflows that you guys are trying to implement in the organization?
So I think there are some agents who just don't want to adopt any of the technology, and that's okay. And we've got to work with them as well. And so what we've tried to do is make sure that our office coordinators, so the people who are in the office every day and making sure the listings are input correctly and all that sort of thing, are aware of everything and that they're utilizing it. And yeah, a lot of our tools agents don't use. We still, you would think that something like, their DeltaNet websites, which we're providing, that they would just go ahead and make sure that it looks the way they want it to. And yet, we have loads of agents who don't log in and look at it. They just put the URL on their business card and so be it. But I think it's always difficult to get agents to adopt it. And so part of what I've tried to do is make sure that everything's super easy or doesn't require the agent to learn anything or do anything special to be able to adopt it.
Franklin, under the heading of change management, one of my concerns has been that because I'm comfortable with the technology and sometimes get excited about the technology, that I would run way ahead of everybody, right? And I would get ahead of my skis myself and just leave the whole brokerage behind, which is not very useful. So we launched recently a voluntary group within the organization. We call it our AI Advisory Council. And it's a group of folks, and they've said, yeah, sure, I'd like to work more with this. So we run things by them. We give them first access to some things in exchange for some feedback. And then we watch them, kind of test some things. Some things work, some things don't seem to get exciting, engagement. So we go, okay, I thought it was, maybe they don't see it. So maybe I didn't sell it right, or maybe it really is not delivering consistently and that. So being able to have an internal group that you are comfortable with showing and testing and asking them to invest a little bit of time and give you feedback, I think could be really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of as a follow-up question to that, obviously you guys both have a little bit more of a tech background. John Adams, you particularly were a developer, a programmer back in the day, I believe. And so my question is, what would you give to the broker leaders that are on this call that want to become more technology oriented, but they don't necessarily know where to begin? What's a good starting place for somebody that's open to being more techie, but isn't there naturally as you guys are?
I was waiting for John to talk.
Sure.
I think that there's easy ways to get involved. You could find somebody who is more techie, who has the basic understanding. To be honest with you, yeah, I mean, I did this when I was in undergrad, but it's 35 years ago, 40 years ago, so it's not like any of this was familiar to me. I had to go out and relearn some of it, but the AI really, I mean, I haven't written any code. Most of what I'm doing is telling the AI what I want it to do, and then it goes off and does things. And I go, nah, it's not quite right. It should look like this, or it should do this, or it should sort when you click this column header. And it goes off and writes a bunch more code, and I look at it again. But if you're not comfortable with it at all, I think that there are quite a few people out there today who can put these things together. And as long as you get them, as long as you build a close relationship and you're not looking at the problem I referenced earlier, where we were trying to build things and we're sending them to people who, you're communicating just by email, or it takes a long time for them to go off and do something. I think it's one of the greatest things that we've got is that the tool can come back and say, would you like it to do this? And I got another idea, and you say, no, that's not necessary, or yeah, that's a great idea. Let's go down that path a little bit. And I would say just open up Gemini or Claude or whatever it is you like to use, and throw some ideas around. It'll write a really good design document for you, and you can turn that over to somebody who can help you to get that built.
Awesome. Thank you.
Frank,
Anything you'd add, John?
yeah, I would say, although again, both John and I have some tech backgrounds, this AI stuff is new to all of us. I mean, we may be a couple steps ahead of others, but it's not by a lot. So my advice would be just start wading into that pond, right? One way or another, and figure it out. I've told a story before that in a way I think that some of my background at first kind of hindered me a little bit because I was trying to approach this new technology using my old skills, right? I mean, I know how to write a Boolean statement, right? And I know how to do those kinds of things. And I was trying to engage with the tools like that. And it took my son, who's a younger guy, who looked at me and said, Dad, you're doing it wrong. Just speak to it. And it's like, no. See, I know how to talk to computers. I'm going to command it. And he's like, no, Dad, have a conversation. And it took a couple of times of him, hitting me on the side of the head to me to say, hey, you know what? Maybe he's onto something here. I need to change my paradigm because that's how I used to know that was my contribution, right? I need to leave that behind and say, okay, I'm not coding this thing anymore. I'm trying to find a conversation. And some of the most amazing thing, as people will discover, part of the conversation is asking it to look at itself, right? So just the thought of giving it a prompt, asking the tool to write a prompt. I mean, that sounds really bizarre, but that's an incredibly useful, practical way to get value out of these things. So once you begin to get you thinking oriented towards those things, and all kinds of great things can happen.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And kind of on this topic, we're talking about things that you guys are building leveraging AI. So one of my questions, and either of you feel free to jump in and answer it if you're passionately one way or the other about it, is do you think there's a particular area where brokerages are underinvesting in technology or not taking advantage of things that you guys have seen value in, and you're just not seeing your peers take advantage of it in the same way?
I think that processing documents, processing files, will be an area that will significantly be aided by AI. And every brokerage does that a little bit differently. Different state regulations do it differently. Different, closing expectations in different states, as have us handling things differently. But in general, just the ability to have another set of eyes looking at all the documents from when they're first being drafted to when they're signed, and as the whole transaction moves forward, I think that'd be a critical aspect of our work that will be aided by AI. It's beginning to happen in some brokerages now, but that will become more common as we go forward.
I think that's dead on. One of the first things the first project I worked on was something that I had that was just in a spreadsheet, which allowed, because I had buyer's agents who were out looking at a contract and getting everything together, and there were sometimes what I would consider sort of simple mistakes, they put in an inspection period that's too long, and it goes right up to or past the closing date, right? And so you can't have that. We had a spreadsheet that they could enter dates into, and it came back and said, here's what all the dates look like, and gave you any warnings. And we redid that using AI. We redid it, and we identified things that we weren't checking for that we probably should have been. And even if it was still in a spreadsheet, which it's not, but even if it was, I think just having the conversation with it, saying this is what we are trying to accomplish, and this is what the spreadsheet does. It'll read the spreadsheet and it'll come back and say, I see what you're doing, but this requirement is actually on federal dates as opposed to what your MLS count is or what your state count is, and we weren't counting all the days the same way, and things like that. So there's so many things like that are day-to-day tasks that can be automated. But the other thing I would say is all the things that I look at that our administrative staff does every day, like John mentioned, checking files, but Another thing is just getting all the files into our transaction management system, which seems really simple, but what we found is that, sometimes an agent will take an entire stack for a contract and scan it and email it over, and sometimes they're going to do one file at a time. And just I found our administrative staff was breaking these things apart, and they had to print it out and look at it just to figure out, pages 1 through 13 are the contract, pages 14 through 16 are the condo rider, and whatever else. Um, we've started down the path of building tools that will look at those files and figure out what it goes to and put them in place. And where I see that going is um, uh, doing further checks with all of that. And I know there's software out there for it, but it doesn't necessarily always take into consideration all the rules that we want. And so so that the person who's still reviewing it, I'm not saying we're getting away from that, but if they have a printout in advance that says, here's the errors that I found, now go look and see, for yourself. I think it makes anything that's tedious, I think is something that AI is going to pick up in the near future. The other thing I would say about it is that I've been at meetings and they say, in 15 years, we're not going to be doing this. I think it's coming a lot faster than people realize. Everything that we've talked about, I started in, probably March is when I first started putting it together. And I've got a dozen different tools that I've identified. Hey, there's a better way to do this. And I can only imagine where I'm going to be in, a year or even by the end of this year, the types of things that we'll be thinking about and thinking, hey, we could probably get AI to do this a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a key question. Or John, I'll go ahead and jump in before I continue.
No, I was going to say, John, I think part of what we have that's a little different from in the past is that while you worked on that really great application that does something pretty unique for you guys, maybe Delta Media comes up with something that's just like it and better and just a little bit tidier. You get to throw away yours, and it's not a big waste, right? The fact that you spent X number of hours on it, it's not like you have a multi-year commitment with a vendor and all this stuff. I mean, it's real easy to move on from this to that, right? Whereas before we would have had such a strong commitment, right? So we need to be evaluating our options all the time, and the challenge will be making sure that our agents know what to use when, because the change and the turnover will be so significant. I think it'll be for the better in so many ways. Franklin, you asked about advantages. I think the obvious cost savings, right? Because we'll be able to do more work, more units of work with less manpower. But in addition to that, I think just being able to deliver tidier processes and tidier experiences for our consumers, right? We make mistakes all the time. Agents, overlook things. They check the wrong boxes, or they don't check the right, enough or whatever, right? Those little things that may not be super consequential, but it's just a little messy, right? So to have the ability to, in detail, look through every single document being exchanged and making sure that all of it, every I is dotted, every T is crossed, that results in a better experience for everybody. It brings greater confidence for the agent. It's better for the consumer because they're not having to wonder and ask questions and things like that. And that's really hard to measure, but I think it's super valuable that we'll be able to have those better experiences.
Yeah, and actually, I wanted to jump in and say, John, thank you for teeing that up. And that please be encouraged, anybody on this call that's a Delta client, to share with us, share with me, cool things that you guys are building, because there are a lot. Like I could tell you, there are several things that John Adam shared with me, particularly like that, picking up on discrepancies in the MLS data. We have that data, and I was like, that's a great report that we could easily build into the DeltaNet, and then it's in one more place. And the more tools like that we can build into the DeltaNet where the agents are already going, or get better buy-in and adoption of that tool, not only is that a win, but also if we're doing things like API calls or the AI tokens on our side, that's less cost for your AI tokens as well. So just please be encouraged, anybody on this call that's doing cool things with our data or with AI tools that you're leveraging, feel free to share it with us, because we are always looking for great ideas to add in. And I can tell you we've got a really long queue of great feature requests and ideas that Jacob Morris and our team manages. And so it's always exciting when we can see some of that stuff and add it in as well. And kind of the last question on this before I move to the next topic, and again, please, either of you feel free to jump in, is what do you think it is that separates brokerages that are thinking about and using technology strategically as you guys are versus somebody that just goes buy software because a sales guy like me pitched them something shiny? Like, how do you approach the thinking about the strategy versus just, oh, that's a cool shiny tool, let me go invest in that?
Yeah, I try and advise the agents to be cautious about the next cool shiny tool because I find that they get started and you know with an agent who relocates to the area or starting in real estate, they get inundated with all these ideas and they lose sight of their business plan while they're chasing something different. And so I think that that's a really important topic because we have the same challenge, right? We have to make sure that anything that we're investing in is going to get appropriate usage, that we're going to have the right rollout, that we're going to make sure we're training the agents so that there's not a lot of confusion. And so, like I said, as much as I can do that's helping them, but isn't affecting isn't causing them to learn something new, is all of that super important. And I will, happily share with you ideas and other things like that as I've done before and said, you guys can build this and it would benefit all your customers and that's something we'll continue to do for sure.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that. John, go ahead. So it looks like you had something to add.
Yeah, it is the adoption conundrum, right, that we always see with any product. One of the beautiful things about real estate is that there are so many ways to be successful in the business, right? And not every one path works for everybody else. So we as managers end up managing multiple paths to success all the time, right? If you have a brokerage of any size, you have to do that. So knowing that some tools are going to be highly accepted and loved by some agents and just not going to connect with others. And that's really difficult, right? I think I find hope in the fact that we can invent some of these solutions quicker and for less cost. So it's not so critical, right? We don't have to have the real high threshold of adoption to justify the investment, right? Because it's just much smaller, cheaper, quicker. So maybe we create something for just one little part of the operation and have them enjoy it and benefit from it and not bother with everybody else. And we'll give them something else, right? Again, it's a difficult communication story. It's a difficult training story, but those things are possible now and they were not very possible before.
Awesome. And so this question is talking a little bit more under the guise of lessons learned. So obviously you guys deal with agents that probably go out and find their own tech tools or try to bring it to you guys and you have to navigate those conversations, or you're dealing with brokerages like Compass that are trying to recruit your agents and they've got their billion-dollar tech stack and everything. So my question is really, how do you navigate agents that have already invested or are coming to you looking for you to invest in technology tools they think are exciting, and how do you navigate those conversations with the agents?
So I like to hear what it is that excites them, right? Because one of the things that's fascinating to me is if there's a great idea that's out there, is it something that we should invest in for everybody, or is it specific to a business plan that agent is following? And then the other thing that I look at is how could we incorporate it so that it works with the rest of our technology? And there's two thoughts there, right? One is that we can help all the agents to get an advantage, but the other thing that's important is I want to reinforce that buy-in to the tools that we're bringing to the table, and help to make sure that that they see that we're here to help them as well. But if they've got something else out there that they like, if they're out there working on another web platform or using a different CRM, I don't necessarily discourage it. Um, I just make sure that we've got best in class. And if for whatever reason somebody's always used this tool with their previous brokerage, or this is what we did, this is how we did it when we lived in Illinois, or whatever else it happens to be, I think you just have to accept that to some extent, and then identify if there is something better there that we could learn from and take advantage of. But I don't force anyone to use anything. I'll say that.
Franklin, I would say that when I see that one of our agents or one of our teams have adopted something, they've bought some product or service, one way for me to look at that is to say, we have this financial relationship, the brokerage and the agents, right? And One way would be to say that they're paying us, right, for all the value that we bring to them, right, at, some amount, right? So if they went outside and paid something monthly to another vendor, it's because they also see that value. So in a way, it's like, wait a minute, where's my value versus your value? And like John said, if it's something new, different, okay, that's great, right? If it's some of the same that we had, it's just maybe it was sold better by a better salesperson, Franklin, that was successful. Then maybe we just got to realize, hey, we're just not explaining our tools well enough. We're not selling them well enough in house because this is the same thing that they were getting for free, but now they're paying $50 a month to get the same thing, right? So I think it's a good reminder to be in those iterations all the time to say, what was that you heard? What was it that talked you into signing the contract and spending this much money? What do you think it's worth spending that much? And how will it benefit your business? And this is just really listening to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good feedback. Is there any measurable impact that you can like directly tie to either a tool that you've built or a report that you're receiving? Really particularly, I'm looking for from either one of you guys. Is there any tool that you could point to immediately that says this is improving operational efficiency? You're getting reports or data that are sent to you that weren't previously available prior to using our APIs or leveraging AI in some particular fashion, that you think is just a really great, easy, here's a tip for anybody on the call. Here's a great report you can get quickly that is going to save you a lot of time in your day.
Well, for me, one of the tools that we've automated as much as we can is we keep a scorecard to say what are the key indicators that we think we need to track. And I can tell you that it was a lot of time pulling all of that together so that we could look at it and we could identify, what's our conversion rate on inbound and outbound leads through the referral network? What is how many people do we bring into the company? How many people left the company for whatever reason? Where did they go? What did it look like? Of course, sales numbers as well, but we try and look at all the leading indicators to determine what are we doing to make sure that things are going forward and reviews and so on and so forth. And we took a lot of time to get that report together and keep it up to date so that our management team had a good idea of what was happening. And so we automated quite a bit of that. And I think what's really interesting is now that we've automated it, we've got a better ability to put it all into one report. We can dive into the data in ways that we couldn't dive into it before. So you can actually drill down and look at, well, how is this county doing, or how's this office doing versus everybody else? And it helps us. I mean, not that we couldn't do it before, but that required us going back out and breaking that data down. And you might say, hey, it would be great if we could look at this, and then the next day we'd be able to look at it. Versus now you can kind of just click right into that data. And where I see that going is being able also to look at that with AI in hand to say, hey, what's happening here that's not happening there that is making a difference for this particular metric, whether that's reviews on particular websites or recruiting, retention, other things along those lines. And I see us moving to a point where we can really dive in and have AI helping us to answer those questions so that we can strategically change and move things forward. So right now it's really just a cost savings of not having to do the work, and the ability to dive into it more readily. But I see that as being a potential as we move forward for much better management decisions.
Awesome. Thank you. John?
Franklin, I'll say I'm probably not that far ahead as John is with some of that ROI. And of course, you guys being the vendors, you'd love to get your ROIs out there. So I'm not quite there yet. However, I know they're coming. And I think the more important nature of this, though, is that even some of the things that we can't measure, we know that it's having an impact, right? And you talked about leadership styles. Not every leader of a brokerage has that analytical approach, right? That's not who they are. That's okay. We're not going to turn them into something else. For those who have it, I think it's a wonderful tool because it can be fed in all kinds of new ways and affordable ways and all that. But for everybody else, that's okay too, right? Because they're not going to be consuming those reports like John's talking about his team doing, because they just won't get on that cadence and that habit. But know that there's a lot of little efficiencies along the way that are going to show up. I would say make sure you're listening to your people. Make sure you're listening to your admins and your other staff, and get their pain points. Find out what's happening, what's really taking up their time, and come back and say, what can these tools do?
Awesome. And so, in the interest of time, I've got two final questions and we'll wrap up here. And this is open for both of you guys to answer as well. If there's any broker owners or C-level executives that are overseeing, hundreds of agents as you guys are that are on this call today, if there's one specific takeaway or one actionable item that you say you should go try this or go experiment with this after this call, what would it be?
Well, if they're not personally using AI in their life, they need to do that immediately. They need to install a couple of models on their phones, and they need to try to find the habit of using it for anything. It doesn't even have to be work related at first. They just need to start getting comfortable, wade into that pool. And talk to others about it, saying, what are you using? What am I using? I think that this thing, frankly, that you guys are doing, trying to bring those examples forward is super, super useful. I'm going to tell you that a year ago, I'm not sure that I had the examples myself. And I had to really kind of learn and bump into things, bump into John and talk about what he's doing, what we're doing and things like that. And it moves very fast. So just I would say, just start doing anything and ask, what's everybody else doing? And how are you doing? How are you getting there?
Yeah, I'm kind of going to answer it with the same answer, but I would adjust it a little bit, and I would say, I sat at a meeting recently, and we had a broker exchange, which or one of the most valuable things that I go to when I go to conferences and things like that, and I was surprised because the topic of AI came up, and there were a lot of people who just sort of said, well, I think it's a fad, or this is going to come and go. And there were a lot of who made that mistake during the internet revolution, right? So don't think that it's going away. Be aware of it, and like John said, just start thinking about how you might be able to use it in various applications. It's really pretty unbelievable what it can do. I use it when we're trying to figure out what movie to watch at night, and I've learned to make sure I ask the question the right prompt. What is a movie that my wife and I would both enjoy, as opposed to what movie would I enjoy for this evening, and little things like that. But you learn a lot just by trial and error, I guess. But and John said earlier, you can ask it. What questions am I not asking? What do I need to ask to get the right prompt? And it's really incredible how well it can walk you into it.
Yeah, I would echo that too. As we've used Claude more at Delta, it's crazy. I've been playing with Claude Design and just the questions you prompted, and it comes back and it has a list of clarifying questions to key in even further. So yeah, don't be afraid to experiment with it because they're intelligent enough now that they'll be able to help you navigate to the right prompt.
Hey, Franklin, if I could add one more thing to that, you know, echoing what John said, I've been around long enough to have seen some of these changes, right? And I don't necessarily mean like the big, from books to computers kind of change, right? Yeah, that one. But just more recent things. For example, at some point, none of us were using online forms, right? We were literally going to carbon, pieces of paper with carbon, right? And then we went to online forms. And depending on your market, maybe you went to online signatures after that, right? There was like a two-step, right? Forms first and, electronic signing later. I remember going through a period of time where people would look at electronic signatures and say, well, that's not real. That's not valid. You can't give me that, and all that, right? At the time, it felt like we were going into some weird space and it didn't make sense. And gosh, do we have to do it the new way because the other way really worked and so on and so forth. If we tried today to take away electronic signatures from our agents, we would have a riot, right? Because no way am I going to drive across town to have this one, price change document signed, right? I mean, this is a piece of cake. I can do this way. So we got to remember that perspective, right? At times, this technology's changes looked scary and uncertain, and do I really have to kind of attitude was prevalent and all those kinds of things. And you mean it's going to cost me more? I mean, I remember when we had to get data plans on our cell phones, right? It's like, really, $35 a month for what, and things like that. Now we would never consider a phone that doesn't have great data access and unlimited data access and things like that. So we need to bring that perspective to our younger agents and remind them that we've been through these changes. They look one way, they turn out a different way. And the good ones stay, and the bad ones we let drift away. I think this is going to be a good one and a really important one, and we will be doing things very differently. We'll be telling a couple stories about, how we used to do things before AI. Do you remember the days, John, when we used to do this without AI? Those kinds of stories.
No, that's a great perspective. You're absolutely right. And I did want to add for anybody that's on the call, I know we're at the hour where we're about to wrap up. Please feel free to use the Q&A prompt that's on Zoom webinar and send any questions that you guys have for John Adams and John D'Souza, and I'll recap those. This was recorded. We'll be sending out a recording of this webinar, and I'll include as best I can any answers to questions that you guys have for the panel here. So feel free to use the Q&A to send those prompts in as I wrap up here. So what I'd like to share is, as I mentioned at the beginning, this was the first of what's going to be an ongoing webinar series. Our commitment at Delta Media Group is to do a live webinar every 2 weeks. We're trying to do these the rest of the year. And some of them I've already done. We did some great product webinars on Delta Create Studio, on the updates to AdWizard instant forms. We did just a couple of weeks ago our DeltaNet 7 admin walkthrough. So please, if you haven't seen the updates to the admin system, I highly recommend you guys watch the admin reveal webinars and start getting hands-on with those tools. And there'll be more on the admin side to come in the coming weeks. 2 weeks from today, we'll be doing another live interview. This will kick off our Delta employee interview series. So for our opening topic on Thursday, June 2nd, I will be interviewing Aaron G., the Chief Marketing Officer here at Delta Media Group, on SEO and GEO, and really helping give clarity and understanding of what GEO is and how SEO relates to it. And there's been plenty of talk online about how SEO is dead. And so Aaron's going to really help break down and deep dive into SEO versus GEO on that webinar in a couple of weeks. So I recommend you guys register for that. And then additionally, for those of you that joined our call today that aren't Delta clients, we operate from single agents all the way up to large enterprise firms. Please reach out to sales@deltagroup.com if you have questions, you'd like a free audit of your website, or just a deep dive into the tools that we offer at Delta Media Group that great brokerages like Adams Cameron and Cressy and Everett have been using for a long time. And on that note, I'll just give a quick laugh. John Adams, you said at the beginning of the call that you've been Delta clients a long time. And I think John D'Souza's got the longest claim of all of our clients. Maybe one beats him. But John's going on 26, 27 years as a client with us. But we have some great long-standing offers, even for existing clients that are on this call today. So if you haven't done a website redesign in a while, Adams Cameron just launched a website redesign with us a couple of weeks ago. Cressy never did a website redesign last year. For those of you that are Delta clients on this call that are interested, we do have a free website promotion for anybody that looks to sign up with ongoing hyperlocal content, any listings running through AdWizard, monthly SEO optimizations. If you sign up for any of our marketing services, we're doing free website redesigns for the rest of this year. So please reach out to me if you've got questions or you want to see what those redesigns options look like for your firm. You can go to www.dmgdemosite.com and navigate all of our website themes real time. It's really easy and simple to do. And I'll leave the meeting open and just kind of give a thank you to our panel for joining today. If you guys have any questions for John Adams and John D'Souza, send them through to me. I'll make sure they get asked to the guys, and I'm sure they're happy to talk to anybody that joined this webinar today. To the panel, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and look forward to doing more webinars in the coming months.